All right, now let's discuss these and other issues. We are now joined by University of South Africa's international law professor, André Thomashausen. Prof, thank you so much for your time. Let's then discuss, the very latest on this particular matter. Norway and Spain, as well as Ireland, saying that they are backing Palestine as a state. How significant is this, particularly in as far as Norway is concerned? Of course, we know that, Norway is also an ally of the US.
Oh, well, I'm not so surprised. This has been in the making for the last 20 years. And of course, a people, a distinct population who live in a distinct and clearly demarcated territory and have a common government, they're entitled to be recognized as a state. Statehood for Palestine was actually already recognized by the International Court, the International Criminal Court, already a few years back. So it is the misfortunate, the terrible conflict that is raging around Gaza and around the government in Gaza, which has been retarding this. And that Hamas organization, which has seized the authority in Gaza in 2007, is by no means uncontroversial, because the elected authority in the West Bank is very much opposed to the rule by Hamas. So these difficulties, internal difficulties in the Palestine territories, they have delayed this. The current military activities, the current use of force, make it maybe not the best of moments to declare a statehood when the very governmental legitimacy for that future state is in dispute.
But as Norway says, Prof, that recognizing Palestine is essential, particularly as they continue to argue of the solution being only, agreed upon if there is a recognition of a two-state solution.
Well, within Hamas, there's a big trend to reject the two-state solution. There's a very strong faction within Hamas who wants a one-state solution. This is by no means uncontroversial. Who is going to represent the state of Palestine, for instance, in the United Nations? Is it going to be the Palestine Authority, or is it going to be Hamas? We are going to look at a similar dispute as we had it in the case of China, where both Taiwan and Beijing claimed to be the legitimate representatives of the country. It will not solve anything. It will not solve a single life. I think it is opportunist. It is trying to detract from the fact that as we speak, every hour, people are dying and people are suffering under the most horrible circumstances. And this can only be changed by a United Nations peacekeeping force, a peacekeeping mission. At least 2 divisions, at least 40,000 armed, competent soldiers have to be positioned in Gaza to stop the fighting.
And just talking about stopping the fighting, Prof, a lot of questions being, asked in terms of what the end game is for Israel. As we sit now, we're looking at least 35,709 Palestinians being killed and 79,000, wounded in the attacks on Gaza since those Hamas attacks on October 7th. Just in the past 24 hours alone, we understand that 62 people were killed. So there is ongoing fighting. What is the end game here? And will we likely then see any peace to the region, in this particular attack?
Not by continuing to deny the problem at the origin of all this, and which also explains Israel's frustration. Nobody in the world has come to the rescue of the hostages. Those innocent people are still languishing in some tunnels, and probably many of them are dead by now, and nobody seems to care about them. There has to be a stop to the use of force on both sides, because Hamas continues to fire missiles onto civilian targets in Israel every day. And this cannot be brought about by further applications in courts that have no authority, no powers to enforce whatsoever. The situation is dire, like in all wars. Let us not forget that the war in Ukraine by now, by all accounts, has cost more than 1 million lives. The conflict in Sudan has cost more than 1 million innocent lives. So wars are terrible, and it is the first and foremost obligation of the United Nations and all member states of the United Nations that are acting in good faith to stop the war, not to argue who is right and who is wrong.
What about then, I mean, this is all happening, recently, given the stance by the International Court, Criminal Court. I mean, with this all happening, of course, questions are also being raised in terms of what you are saying. There also needs to be almost like a parallel, process that's happening in terms of, addressing punitive measures against those transgressors. So, what then do we make of the recent developments in light of the ICC's stance, in terms of wanting then to wanting at least to issue warrants of arrest for those said transgressors, in Israel as well as Hamas?
Well, I approach it from a practical point of view. What is the point of issuing warrants of arrest that cannot be enforced? The warrants of arrest against the Hamas leaders cannot be enforced because they are not going to leave the tunnels where they're hiding, or they live in Qatar, by the way, in great luxury, some people say in billionaire circumstances, and Qatar is not a member of the ICC and will never enforce a warrant. So these warrants are a symbolic stance, but they have no practical effect. And again, I maintain they detract from the necessity to intervene with a peacekeeping force to stop the dying, to stop the immense human suffering in that area.
Prof, thank you so much for your insights. I really do appreciate it. Of course, that is Professor André Thomashausen.